This is a video about conscious force, the 10th chapter of Aurobindo's Life Divine. Good afternoon, this is Chris speaking. Wake up with another video about Aurobindo's Life Divine. We have seen in the last chapter the pure existent that we cannot describe pure existence, although we can perceive it by intuition and surrender, as Satchitananda. Existence, consciousness, bliss. But what exactly is this Satchitananda? And what's blissful about it? Thank you for liking this video and subscribing to this channel. Now, it is very interesting, this term Satchitananda. Sat means existence or truth. Chit means consciousness. And Ananda means bliss or delight. Why is that how the enlightened Vedic masters have perceived the absolute and chose those three words as a valid description? Certainly, this is not what we as human beings usually experience the world or our lives as. Existence, consciousness, bliss, especially bliss. Who experiences that? Almost no one. We experience suffering, pain, fear, grief, regret, anger, worry, and such most of the time. And sometimes we experience joy, love, exhilaration, excitement, contentment, relaxation, and other so-called positive emotions. But not as often. And bliss? What bliss? What exactly is blissful about our existence? Bliss is a strong word, or delight. And also, what is conscious? Nature just seems to unfold mechanically. Most of our planet is consisting of stone, water, metal, air, like metal, like aluminum and iron. What is conscious about those substances? Also, this world does not seem to us to be the best of all possible worlds. We can easily imagine a better world. So if we can already imagine a better world, what about an omnipotent being? If an omnipotent being can create everything it wants to, why should it create this world, how it is now, with pain and evil and suffering? Or just the constant eat or be eaten that we can see in the animal kingdom. What's great about that? What's blissful about that? Those are important questions, especially the one question, why is there suffering and evil in the world? This is one of the most important and oldest human questions ever. And this is why Aurobindo starts with it. The first 8 chapters of the Life Divine were about where we are now. The next chapters 9 to 12 are about where we are going, the other end of the spectrum, our aim, our direction, the highest level of consciousness accessible to us. But the topic of bliss on the one hand and suffering of evil on the other hand is treated in the next 2 chapters. First, he's going after Chit, consciousness. Is creation, is nature, is the universe conscious or not? Not as natural sciences believe today. Maybe the creation of the universe has been brought into existence by a conscious act, like the Big Bang. But afterwards, what do we need consciousness for? Things are expanding according to the laws of physics, and things are growing according to the laws of biology. Where is there consciousness involved here? For Aurobindo, these 2 words, consciousness and force, are describing one and the same thing. We experience consciousness by experiencing force, including things like gravity. We can see force as matter in motion, but that is too superficial for our purposes of human perfection. We can easily see that eternal expansion and extension is a modus of this force, as also physicists have found out. And we can also perceive it as sound, as vibrations, like om or hum, for example. In all ancient traditions of the world, to give another example, there is a law of 4 or 5 elements. In Europe, it's earth, fire, water, air. In China, earth, metal, water, wood, fire, and in India, ether, air, fire, water, earth. These are not stupid superstitions, nor are they anything like the elements of the chemical periodic table. These are attributes of manifesting force. The force manifests the existent into things like matter. At least that is how it appears to our human nervous system. For example, to have a look at those Indian elements, ether is like the space in which it all happens. The whole thing has to happen somewhere. Then air is contact. It's different aspects meeting and beginning to interact. And fire is light, the principle of sustainment, so that they don't disappear immediately again. But still nothing stable would exist. So therefore we need a medium of diffusion, a solution that holds everything in place or can make it manifest, which is water. And then something has to make it solid, that is earth, of course. And what we usually do is we focus on the earth aspect, the physical. It is the most obvious and gross, but there's more. What is still missing here for Aurobindo is the conscious aspect, though, and more so conscious sensation. The old explanation might explain how a seemingly formless, invisible all and everything or all and nothing can translate itself into force or even into matter. Even the concept of Mahat and Ahankara is not enough. The principle of force and principle of division, or the three principles, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, still this could be happening mechanically, without any consciousness or plan. Indeed, many teachers have already claimed that it is mechanical. Also teachers of enlightenment have said that there is no will guiding everything. It just is, unconsciously. So there's obviously some kind of force, or even forces at work here. We might call them laws. But is there a proof that this force or forces is conscious somehow? This is no problem we can solve by thinking or forging ever more theories. This is endless and doesn't lead anywhere. In Indian tradition, force is often called Prakriti. This is the force that manifests everything, brings everything into being, while existence, the pure being, the great beholder, is called Purusha. How do these two communicate, and how do they pass on this cosmic communication, this consciousness, onto their creations? Is the beholder asleep like Vishnu, or is it conscious, alert, all-seeing, all-sensing, and actively all-powerful? There seems to be a submental consciousness. That's one part. This submental consciousness is present and at work in all beings and all things. Call it survival, growth, procreation, life, creation. But that is more material and cannot be called awake. And at least not in the terms that we want to use this. It's actually more an argument against the higher consciousness, really. And even as Aurobindo digresses, if life on the planet would come from another planet, it would explain nothing. Nothing about evolution or transmission of consciousness, at least, which is for him the core question. The solution about a higher consciousness pervading all of the universe is our word consciousness, because we equate consciousness with thinking, with our self-awareness. So we are stuck and create a theoretical problem. What we call consciousness is knowing or being aware. But in truth, consciousness is a form of energy, just as mind and matter are too. It is only a question of graduation, of subtlety. And consciousness is not a description of this existence or a consciousness of something or someone. It is not that Sat, Chit or Ananda can be conscious or unconscious, or subconscious or half-conscious. They are consciousness. Consciousness is the same as existence, force, bliss. It's not an adverb, something or someone that is conscious. True consciousness is the same as existence, as the absolute, as the universe. We just think and judge from ourselves that consciousness implies someone who is conscious, who is intelligent as we are. That there is someone other than the planets, for example. That there has to be someone in the universe, some kind of being who is conscious. It's very difficult for us to understand that the whole universe in itself is consciousness, including all its visible and invisible parts. It is just our projection, our usual anthropomorphism again, which describes everything modeled and mirrored after our own example, with subjects and objects. But the absolute is both object and subject, or beyond both. It doesn't need objects and subjects. And this consciousness or conscious force of existence is something beyond the concept of mind, something beyond mental, and that's why he calls it supramental. Here Aurobindo introduces his famous term supramental. Here this of course can be misunderstood again. What he describes here with supramental is something superconscient to us, beyond our human comprehension, beyond what humans call the mind, the mental process, or cognitive process. It is so much bigger and complex than us. You could also call it meta-conscious or ultra-conscious, meaning it is not a bigger or better form of our consciousness, but something far beyond ours. We can feel its presence, but we cannot grasp it. It is not a being like a human being or an insect or a tree or bacteria, just somehow big and more intelligent, no? It is something completely different. And this completely different we can see as a unity of Sat, Chit and Ananda, as force, existence, force, consciousness. Yeah? These three, they're also the true basis of the early Christian traditions of Jesus, before it has been lost by the church, mostly. The Trinity, yeah? Father, Son, Holy Spirit, same meaning. They're inseparable. One thing that is no thing. It is isness. Can be described in this Trinity, but actually it's one thing. And its force is the mother of all force and energy and manifested matter. And the consciousness is all consciousness. The complete knowledge and awareness of everything beyond time, beyond space, and even stretching far back before time and space and existence even existed. Yeah, they read like the Chinese Wuji, which is unimaginable to us, something that was before existence or before time, which solves one problem for seeking after truth in this regard, but opens up another. If the Absolute is all conscient and supramental, then does it not control everything? And is it not only omniscient and omnipresent, but also omnipotent, all-powerful? And if it is all-powerful, then why create a world that includes suffering, or what we call evil? Bam! The age-old question of all religions. How can God allow suffering? Or even make suffering the main mechanism that seems to be going on here in this creation? This is a problem. And this will be answered in the next chapter or the next two chapters, the delight of existence, the problem and the solution. Why not create a perfect world without suffering? And in those next 2 chapters, we will look into the aspect of delight of Ananda. But before we end, a quick summary of this very difficult 10th chapter. Aurobindo translates Chit with conscious force. And not only with consciousness or only with force, but with conscious force. For there is a force and it must be conscious, or it would not be the highest force. And there is a consciousness which must be a force, otherwise there would be no creation, no manifestation. And this force is in everything all the time, even in Maya, the big illusion, the big veil of ignorance and forgetting. And existence and consciousness and force are one and the same thing. And this thing, this absolute, is doing all this to experience the delight of existence, as we will see in the next video. Aurobindo writes, all phenomenal existence resolves itself into force, into a movement of energy that assumes more or less material, more or less gross or subtle forms for self-presentation to its own experience. Matter is the presentation of force, which is most easily intelligible to our intelligence, molded as it is by contexts in matter, to which a mind involved in material brain gives the response. Meaning, what we see and experience as matter is the rather gross form of force and consciousness we can most easily compute. Also because our brain has been trained to do so by matter and is made of matter. We are a walking library of habits and literal brainwashing. That is why it is so difficult for us to perceive, think, experience differently. We have been trained by matter to perceive it and adhere to its apparent laws. But that does not mean that there's nothing else there. We are like a finely tuned sensor, which can sense a certain frequency only because it has always done so, programmed to do so. Always has been used only thus, never otherwise. We can use this sensor, this radio, this receiver to receive other frequencies. But that means we have to change habits and give up old habits, surrender. One of the biggest things we have to surrender is our previous program that we had up till today, that the world is unfair and full of suffering and pain and evil and hardship. This program might be partly true, but it has not brought about any change or improvement. It's just self-confirming, a recurrent self-fulfilling prophecy. We expect bad things to happen and good things not to happen, so it continues to appear like that. But if we tune into this conscious force and let ourselves be guided by it, things start to change. For one, we can suddenly perceive and experience much, much more than before. We can finally take off our blinkers. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking and subscribing. Thank you for joining me on Patreon or Facebook. And thank you very much to all my Patreons. See you soon.